Ryan, my goodness. He's based out of Nature Conservancy's Greenville office. His entire professional career has been nonprofit development, ranging from higher education and human services to the performing arts. Boy, there's a real Renaissance guy for you. He enjoys developing relationships with people to help them reach their philanthropic goals. Ryan grew up in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I bet you know how to surf, where the salt marshes, the Atlantic Ocean, and the Intercoastal Waterway were his playgrounds. After moving to the upstate South Carolina in 2009, Ryan found his new outdoor escape on the trails and near the waterfalls of the southern Blue Ridge Mountains. And Greg and I, our favorite place in South Carolina is Lake Jocassee up that way, and right there along the blue wall they call it, and it's just extraordinary area. So I understand why you love it. Ryan graduated from Presbyterian College with a BA in history, and he also spent a semester abroad at the National University of Ireland in Galway. He's a certified fundraising executive, having met a set of professional standards and requirements. He's a past president of the Association of Fundraising Professionals Piedmont chapter, a past board member for the Rotary Club of Greenville, and a current member of the Community Foundation of Greenville's Grants Review Committee. He was recently recognized as a top 40 under 40 by the GSA Business Report. During his tenure with TNC's South Carolina chapter, Ryan has also supported regional teams on projects in Senegal, Tanzania, and Indonesia, as well as launched a global internal sustainability program for TNC employees. He remains an active member of the Rotary Club of Greenville, where he has helped launch a matching gift program for Rotary clubs supporting environmental projects through the support of Rotarian and TNC member Mark Makalinsky. Ryan lives in Greenville with his wife and 2 young children. And at this point, I would like to share my screen because members are probably aware of this, but we submitted an application as a part of the matching grant program that I just mentioned in Ryan's introduction. And Julie Tovey was really the one who spearheaded getting all of this put together. But Ryan, thank you so much for your role in working with the Rotary clubs in our district, with the Makalinsky family, to do what we're currently working on. It's underway already, is some really cool projects. And we have lots of partners. The projects involve a culinary garden in Anderson, pond and a garden for science at McCormick Elementary, and at Wren High School, a pollinator and mental health garden. And we have a work day coming up April 27th, actually, at Wren High School, just south of Greenville. So Ryan, without you, this wouldn't have been possible. And so we just really appreciate you and share our thanks and gratitude for the role that you've played in helping us help other people. So that said, I'm going to get out of your way and take it away. It's all yours.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for just the opportunity to speak. And I gotta say, I really like the having the backgrounds here. It does make me feel welcome, and it's a unique approach to it. So I'm grateful for that. I want to see here. I can't see anybody's faces anymore. That's probably okay. But you all can hear me just fine and see my screen. Is that correct? I'll make sure.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, yeah, I can't see anybody else here. We had it set up earlier. I just want to make sure I'm good to go here. Well, we'll just roll with it. Please speak up. I cannot see anyone's screen here with sharing this. But again, I just want to thank you all. As a Rotarian myself, it's always a pleasure to speak with other Rotary clubs and understand how Rotarians work and think and operate. And I've really enjoyed being a Rotarian over the years for the Greenville Rotary Club. But thank you all again for your participation in that Makalinsky matching grant partnership. I played a very small role in it, and that's my job at TNC, is to be a dot connector and to work with our funding partners, to work with members of the community to help us all reach our philanthropic goals and move that conservation needle forward. As Candace mentioned, I'm based out of our Greenville office and the Associate Director of Philanthropy, and have been a Rotarian for the last 13 years. But as we celebrate Earth Month, I'm just really excited to share more about the Conservancy's efforts. I'm going to talk a little about our efforts both abroad and then really zero in on our efforts here locally, and to help you all understand just who TNC is. And to do that, I'm going to share just a quick video. It's about 2.5 minutes long. I always like showing this video at the start of a presentation because it really gives you that drone level view of who the Nature Conservancy is and how we operate. And then again, we'll kind of focus more in on the local efforts here. I'll do this snapshot of a video first here. Bear with me.
Earth, a stunning panorama of life. This is what drew most of us to conservation in the first place. But as the world has become ever more connected and complex, we've come to realize that while conservation is still about saving these animals and these places, it's also about us and our ability to ensure our own survival.
The Nature Conservancy has an extraordinary legacy of protecting land and water at an enormous scale. But today, we realize that we can't protect nature just one place at a time. We have to work at multiple places around the globe to make a profound difference so that both people and nature thrive.
By 2050, global population is expected to grow to more than 9 billion people. The growing needs for food, water, and energy will tax our natural world as never before. At the same time, we face the threats of climate change, major biodiversity loss, and water scarcity. A new kind of conservation is needed.
We're using science to set our priorities, but really a whole new set of science that we haven't used before. We're having to look at economics, agronomy, and hydrology to help us see the whole scope of the challenges that we face and make sure we're doing the most effective, important things.
We believe that we can harness the awesome power of nature and renew our thriving planet.
We are focusing on the things that will have the greatest impact on our world. We're still committed to protecting land and water. We'll continue to protect critical ecosystems, especially ones that won't be protected unless we step up and do it. We're still in that business. We're also now in the business of addressing climate change, feeding the world sustainably, and bringing nature to cities. That's the TNC game plan for the big challenges ahead.
For this spectacular planet and all the life it holds, the clock is ticking. Only by working together can we give people hope. Keep our wildlife wild. Keep our home whole. And ensure the future of a world that sustains us all.
All right, trust that video worked for everyone. We were able to hear it and see it. If not, that was 2.5 minutes that you'll never get back. So all good, wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm gonna go back to just sharing my other screen here. If you just bear with me for a moment. Wonderful. Oh, excuse me here. So as mentioned earlier, TNC is the world's largest and leading conservation organization. But I think it's special about our organization, I mentioned earlier, is we're also hyper-focused locally. So we operate in all 50 states. We have chapters in all 50 states. So I had the pleasure of working for our South Carolina chapter, really focused on our conservation efforts here in South Carolina. But we also, as I said, have chapters in all 50 states, and then we have operations in over 79 countries abroad. We're headquartered in Arlington, Virginia, and strategically in Arlington, Virginia, so we can work on Capitol Hill and work with elected officials to try to pass the best legislation that helps us achieve our conservation efforts. We are a science-based organization, first and foremost. We are a nonpartisan organization. And I think being science-based and nonpartisan has really led the Nature Conservancy to grow over the last 70 years to be the world's largest and leading conservation organization. Here in South Carolina, we have a satellite office here in the upstate in Greenville. We also have an office in Columbia, and our main office is down in the Low Country in Mount Pleasant. And this gives you just a quick snapshot of where we are and what we're doing. To further that, our mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. So again, as a conservation organization, we are science-based. We're finding the most critically pieces of land to protect for future generations, both for people and nature's sake. In South Carolina, we've been working in Palmetto State for the last 55 years. We have about 9,500 members in South Carolina. So a member is anybody that gives at least $25 a year to support our conservation efforts. We have over 400 scientists worldwide, and here just in South Carolina, we are pleased that we have protected over 420,000 acres here since TNC kicked off in South Carolina. A little bit too about our work. Again, land protection has always been our bread and butter, but over the years, TNC has grown to do forest restoration, freshwater protection, marine work, providing food and water sustainably, and again, working on the government relations front to really expand our efforts. But really what we do in South Carolina matters on a global scale. Globally, we face this interconnected crisis of biodiversity, loss, and climate change. And TNC has set ambitious goals to address these threats, including protecting 30% of the planet by 2030. What you see on your screen is a Bachman's warbler. This was last confirmed sighting was in 1988, and it is considered extinct now due to habitat destruction. And on the sandpit, on the right hand of your screen, is the Sandpit River. This is down in Georgetown, South Carolina. And you can see there as saltwater encroaches due to rising sea levels and a changing climate, you can see those vast cypress trees, those forests that used to be right along the river. They're dying off. They've been ravaged by this high salinity content coming through the river. And now really we just have these skeletons of trees in this once thriving freshwater ecosystem. So it's really important that we find these most critical spaces in South Carolina and across the globe that are being impacted by a changing climate, impacted by development, and making sure that we protect the most ecologically sensitive areas within our state. The beauty of the Nature Conservancy is in that local to global approach that I've mentioned before. And here in South Carolina, we contribute to our global goals through 6 pillars. And those 6 pillars are protect land and water, secure fresh water, creating resilient coastlines, healthy oceans, restoring our forests, and engaging on climate. Today, I really want to unpack 2 of these areas, protect land and water and forest restoration. But of course, if you have questions about any of the other pillars, I'd be happy to address those later on in this presentation. Quick snapshot here. Here's our lovely state. Now, this map highlights the various project sites in South Carolina where TNC has been engaged in conservation projects. So you can see here, and it may be tough to see on your screens, but everywhere from land protection, securing fresh water, our resilience and adaptation really happen a lot on the coastlines. But that shows just a quick area of where we're working. And TNC prides itself in being one of the really only conservation groups in the state that works mountains to sea, Appalachians to Atlantic. Our scientists, while we may be in various geographies, our conservationists and scientists with the South Carolina chapter are working throughout the state and many times cross borders with other chapters in North Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee to make the right decisions here for our conservation efforts. After all, a black bear doesn't know if it's in North Carolina or South Carolina, and a longleaf pine doesn't know if it's growing in Georgia here or South Carolina. So really working cross borders, and that's a beautiful part about the Nature Conservancy, having the footprint that we do with these chapters in every state. So when it comes to land protection, how do we decide where we're going to protect and where we're going to focus? Well, as I mentioned, we're a science-based organization. This map you're looking at right now, this is our conservation vision map. It was updated in 2018, and this map we're looking at together today was just updated last spring of 23 to show additional land holdings. But what you're looking at here, if you see those gold areas, those are protected areas. Way to go, South Carolina. That is our TNC members, that is the Nature Conservancy, that is the state park system, DNR, other conservation groups. Those gold areas show all the protected public lands in South Carolina. But the thing I want to call out here are those light green and dark green areas. Those are our cores and our buffers. And so when the Nature Conservancy is looking to protect a tract of land, we might learn of a piece of property that is coming online on the market. Someone might call us up about a property they have. And the first thing that we're going to do as a science-based organization is we're going to put that property and map it out on this conservation vision map. And if that land is fallen in this white area, it doesn't make sense for us to put our resources into protecting that area. There's probably a lot of development around there already, and not those biological resources and that habitat diversity that we're ultimately trying to protect. But when it falls in those light and dark green areas, we're all over it. We're going to try our best to work with other groups and work with our membership to save those properties. But what I want you to notice is that a lot of those light green and dark green areas are near those gold areas, already protected areas. We're trying to create what we call forest blocks or climate corridors. We know that in the face of a changing climate, animals are going to be needing to migrate. So we want to create these natural highways, if you will, where animals can migrate from the coast up through South Carolina and have protected lands to do so. The other nice thing is that when we have these large swaths of protected lands and these forested lands, it's just these big chunks of trees that are pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. So, real intentional about how we protect land and where we protect land. So, land protection is really in our DNA. Our first project was in 1969 when the Nature Conservancy partnered with Audubon Society to create the Francis Beidler Forest. Many of you may have been there before. It's an 18,000 acre bird and wildlife sanctuary with the world's largest old growth cypress tupelo swamp forest, which is just right here in our state, right off the interstate. Encourage you, if you haven't, just off of I-26 in Columbia, if you have not visited Beidler Forest, really encourage you to do so. And pictured here is and the yellow there is a prothonotary warbler, and more than 2,000 of these warblers come to the Beidler Forest each year from their wintering grounds in Central and South America each spring to nest. You might recognize their sweet, sweet, sweet song if you go to Beidler Forest, but a beautiful bird, and just another reason why we protect these habitats for these animals migrating, whether it's from the coast of South Carolina up to the mountains, or it's animals migrating from South America through South Carolina. We want to have places for animals to rest, relax, and keep the ecosystem whole and keep that biodiversity diverse. So since that time, since 1969, we did the Beidler Forest. Again, we have protected over 420,000 acres of land from the Appalachians down to the Atlantic. And pictured here, just a few of those projects as well. To the left there is our Gap Creek project, which I'll talk more about momentarily. We have a longleaf pine plantation down there where the Nature Conservancy works initiating prescribed fire burns to help these longleaf pines flourish. And then we also have the Black River Preserve there with someone kayaking. I mentioned earlier, the Nature Conservancy is working with state parks and the Open Space Institute to create a new state park for South Carolina along the Black River down in Georgetown. It's going to be a 75-mile long stretch of the Black River with protected land on both sides, where folks will be able to hop in a canoe or a kayak and paddle for days down the river and get out and camp and hike along the way. So real excited about that. But what I really want to do now is kind of shift here and talk a little bit more about how, again, we do this land protection. There are really two main ways the Nature Conservancy protects lands. It's through the use of a tool we call a conservation easement, and then through outright purchasing land. So a conservation easement, for those you may not be familiar with, that's essentially when the Nature Conservancy or any land trust enters into an agreement with a landowner to purchase the development rights of their property from the landowner. So in these cases, the landowner still retains their property, their rights to their property. However, they have given up those development rights. They've put a conservation easement on their property. There's certainly some great tax incentives to doing that as well. And many folks that just want to make sure that their land is protected in perpetuity will work with the Nature Conservancy or another land trust to do a conservation easement. Conservation easements last forever. So even when that property is sold, that easement is still on that property. And the Nature Conservancy, as an easement holder, we are required to monitor at least once a year, annually, each of these properties to make sure that the landowners are in fact keeping up with the terms of their easement. It may be number of subdivisions on the property, of course, development of the property. It could be, foresting timber, harvesting timber on the property. And we still allow the harvesting of timber and still allow some of those things, but making sure it's done in a sustainable way. So to your left there, you'll see that's a picture of the Table Rock Reservoir. So for those of you in Greenville, or if you're up here visiting Greenville and you get a cup of water. More than likely, it came from that Table Rock Reservoir. The Nature Conservancy back in 1993 entered into an agreement with Greenville Water in the city of Greenville to put a conservation easement on all 30,000 acres surrounding our two main reservoirs for the water here in Greenville. Really credit to the forethought of those leaders back in 1993 that saw the upstate growing, saw that that they were the fortunate owners of the forested areas around the reservoir, and worked with the Nature Conservancy to protect that. We just celebrated 30 years of that easement last year. And the Greenville watersheds are only one of 3 watersheds in the entire country that are completely protected. So if you think the third area where Greenville gets their water, they get their water from the Table Rock Reservoir pictured here, the North Saluda Reservoir, and then Lake Keowee. And of course, Lake Keowee is not protected, and there's homes all along the reservoir there, the water intakes, and that's all fine, but it just costs more money from utilities to treat that water, which ultimately gets passed on to the end users, us as customers. So we're really fortunate here in the upstate of South Carolina to have those water resources protected. So that was one conservation easement that, again, has been going on for 30 years and will continue to go on forever. Another one we just were wrapping up right now is Camp Awanata, which is located adjacent to Jones Gap State Park. The Nature Conservancy just put an easement on just over 500 acres at Camp Awanata. This is a big win for the Nature Conservancy and a big win for the camp. We purchased those development rights of those 500 acres from the camp. Camp just wanted the woods there anyways for equestrian trails and hiking trails. So it's a win for them. And the total cost of that easement was about $1.5 million that the Nature Conservancy paid to Camp Awanata in order to protect their property. Now Camp Awanata get a nice influx of cash there that they can use for capital improvements at their camp, which is a popular spot for students and adults alike. When it comes to outright purchasing land, just want to highlight one other project here in the upstate. Back in 2018, the Nature Conservancy purchased 955 acres adjacent to Jones Gap State Park, and then we transferred that land to South Carolina State Parks. Right now, we are working with the Palmetto Trail Foundation to design and build 20 miles of trails on this new 955-acre property that you see here. And those will be open up in the next 1 to 2 years, we expect, but these will be public lands. We'll also be adding a new parking area to this Gap Creek property. For those of you that may have been in Jones Gap State Park before, you might be familiar. There's only 17 parking spots for this very popular upstate state park. It's kind of like a nightclub, 1 car in, 1 car out for folks going to visit that park. And we're thrilled that we're not only going to be able to add 20 miles of trails for folks to explore, in addition to having more parking areas. You can just take a quick trip with me down to the low country because this is a big one for us. Gregory Neck. We just closed on this property and purchased it on February 14th, Valentine's Day of this year. 4,409 acres in Jasper County, includes 13 miles of shoreline. Pretty unheard of to still find that much intact land owned by one owner down in the low country. This is the Nature Conservancy's biggest financial investment in our history in South Carolina. We purchased this property for $35 million. It was listed by the owner. It's a former plantation. There's a gorgeous plantation home still on the property. Listed for $39 million. The Nature Conservancy, we are only ever able to offer the appraised value that we get on a property. We cannot offer above appraised value. So we had the property appraised. We were able to offer $35 million. There were higher offers than ours, one from a real estate developer that had plans to put 10,000 homes on this property. The other was from a golf course designer that wanted to open up a golf course out here. So you can just imagine what this property would have looked like with 10,000 homes on or a golf course. But now this property is going to be protected forever. And what the Nature Conservancy is doing with our Gregory Neck property is a model that we call buy, protect, and resell. So we have bought the property. Step 1 is complete. And step 2 is also complete. We have protected the property. So the Nature Conservancy has put a conservation easement on this entire 4,400 acre tract of land, limiting the future development pieces to it. And now we're on the third step, which is to resell the property. So now that we have divided it into 4 separate tracts, we're working on reselling those tracts to conservation-minded buyers that might be looking for land to have a home or to have hunting grounds or just to have land to enjoy or to invest in. Those easement terms, again, will allow for a small dwelling to be built. There'll be a cap on the square footage and where that property would go. Most of those development rights will be taken up with the conservation easement while still making it an attractive area for our potential buyers. So make no mistake, we did not have $35 million in our bank account to purchase this property. We were able to get some extremely great interest rates from two private lenders, one being the Nature Conservancy, our global office, offering a favorable interest rate for us to acquire these large tracts of land, and then a private individual who also very conservation minded, works with us in some of these larger land deals. Just to kind of quick show you, if you can see here on this screen, the red highlighted area is Gregory Neck, but you can see again how it is near adjacent protected lands as well. And then ultimately, the Tolfini and Coosawhatchee rivers are on either side of this property, which flows into the Port Royal Sound. So protecting this land really has an impact on that water quality that comes through Gregory Neck. Our goal now is to connect the Ace Basin, and that's where the Ashpoo, Combahee, and Edisto rivers all come together. Our goal now is to connect the Ace Basin to the north over to the Savannah River with a wildlife corridor there. Shifting over from land protection, I told you kind of two main areas I want to make sure you all heard about today in the Nature Conservancy's work is land protection and forest restoration. Those are the two big areas that we work on here in the upstate of South Carolina. So, if the goal is to restore our forest, then the main tool we use to accomplish this effort is through the use of prescribed fire or controlled burning. And from the mountains to the sea, we have we have two burn crews that work during the burn season, which is typically during the winter time when leaves are off the trees, and they are burning properties by the Nature Conservancy as well as public lands, South Carolina state parks. We do a lot of burning down at Sherall State Park, Candace. So your picture there, we do a good bit of work down that way as well. But these high heat fires or low flames, high heat, and what we do is our fire crews come in and we're burning the forest floor. And when we do and we burn, and people, Smokey the Bear was one of the best marketing campaigns, but almost too good of a marketing campaign that a lot of times we think fire, forest, no good. Well, these forests have relied on fires over millennia to clear out these debris. We know that Native Americans use fire to control their forest and to manage wildlife. But when we burn the layers of fuel loads on the ground, two great things happen. First is when you burn these areas, you all of a sudden sunlight can reach that forest floor a bit more, right? And so now all of a sudden a lot more of our native plants can grow, which are essentially groceries for the animals and habitat for the animals. The other nice thing that happens is that when we reduce the fuel loads by using these prescribed fires, is that in the case of an accidental wildfire near restored forest, they're not going to have any fuel to keep on burning. So there's a big public safety component. We're fortunate here on the East Coast that we don't have a lot of the wildfires that we see out on the West Coast. And that's because here on the East Coast, we've been more focused on forest restoration and using fire to combat wildfires, if you will. But you can see our colleague there on the left, that's Tom Dooley. He's one of our burn bosses here for South Carolina chapter. And on that picture on the right shows a restored forest, and you can see that open canopy, and you can see the sky there that's allowing more sunlight to come and to have that vegetation grow rather than just a real crowded looking forest. One other quick highlight too, just of some of our work down on the low country. It's another pillar of our work, and it's creating resilience through nature-based solutions. Science tells us that our climate's changing, but we don't need science to tell us that. We see our friends and family down the low country experiencing constant flooding and these intense storms. And the Nature Conservancy has worked with South Carolina DHEC and with other conservation groups to have living shorelines approved as a way to mitigate these intense storms and disasters and to mitigate the erosion that takes place down the low country. So essentially what these living shorelines do, we are getting oysters and bagged oysters and creating oyster castles. And what these oyster castles do is, one, they provide a plethora of habitat for marine animals. And then also when we put these oyster castles up along a marshy area or a sandy area that we wish to grow more marsh grasses, those sediments start building up behind the oyster castles. So we are able to restore these areas in that way and protect our shorelines. If you think about a seawall just being kind of a concrete area or wooden area, when a wave hits that seawall, that energy from that wave still has to go off somewhere. When we have a living shoreline in these oyster castles, the wave energy just kind of breaks up when it hits that living shoreline. so you don't have that energy getting sent elsewhere. And we're able to, again, start backfilling those marshy areas to make that make just a bit more sense. This is on Goldbug Island. The picture on your left there is a brand new oyster castle we had installed. And then look to your right there, after quite some time, you start seeing these marsh grasses come back, the marsh, the pluff mud building back up. And again, not to mention when it's high tide there, you have, and even when it's low tide, you do have loads of, habitat for those marine animals. And your fun fact you can use next time, if you don't know already, that just one oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water a day. So we're placing thousands of oysters out these living shorelines. We're really helping to beautify the water there and to filter the water in those areas. That really wraps up. I'm going to take a quick time for questions if we have a few moments. Pictured here is Lanny's Cascade. This is at the Nature Conservancy's Blue Wall Preserve. Worth mentioning that we own and manage 2 nature preserves here in the upstate of South Carolina, at our Blue Wall Preserve in northern Greenville County and our 9 Times Preserve in Pickens County. And recognize we also have some folks in the Midlands, I believe, on today's call. Our Peachtree Rock Heritage Preserve just outside of Columbia is also a spot that we maintain for people in nature to enjoy, and they're open 365 days a year from sun up to sundown. So thank you all for listening.
And my goodness, Ryan, thank you so much. This is how we clap when we're on mute. So if you can't hear us clapping. Wow. I have a few comments, but there are a number of questions in the chat. So I think we'll just go from the top. And Lene asked, what's the relationship between the various conservation agencies issuing the conservation easements? There are several moving parts apparently there.
Yes, it's a great question. So, Candace has mentioned in my my bio there is that I've raised money for a buffet of causes in South Carolina, if you will, and I tell you that they all work together. We all work together in these different sectors pretty well, but in the conservation world, groups work better together than I've ever seen. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One, there's just a lot of passion behind conservation. 2, conservation is expensive, right? We're talking about purchasing land. It's not running a food bank, and food banks obviously are incredibly important, but we're talking about purchasing large tracts of land. So it really requires every group kind of having their own niche and their thing they work on. So we work very well together for the most part, I would say. When it comes to the difference between the relationship, the Nature Conservancy, so we're the big folks in town. So we are going to focus on really 500 plus acres on conservation easements. For instance, I had somebody call me last week that lives over in Travelers Rest that wanted to put a conservation easement on their 50-acre farm. We love to hear that. It's really not the best project for the Nature Conservancy to work on, but the Farm Bureau Land Trust that just started about 6 months ago, it's a great project. So we call it the Farm Bureau Land Trust, facilitated that introduction, and they're going to protect their 50 acres that way. So really, it's a geography thing where there, different land trusts. You have the Upper Savannah Land Trust that works a lot in the Piedmont, the Nature Conservancy in Upstate Forever, really here the Upstate. Of course, Nature Conservancy is statewide. But that's kind of how that works. It's like, who's the best fit for them? We all know each other. So it's like, oh, this is a good one for Natural Land Trust, or this is a good one for, Coastal Conservation League type of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. Wow. And thank you. And I'm going to insert a very quick editorial comment here. I did retire from the U.S. Forest Service, and I worked in East Tennessee. And what I know from personal experiences, the Nature Conservancy was often critical to managing and protecting the Appalachian Trail corridor all up and down the East Coast. And what a lot of people don't understand is the state and federal agencies can't necessarily act quickly when a property comes up on the market. They'll see a very precious property come up, but putting the public money together just can't happen quickly. And so the Nature Conservancy, along with land trust organizations and others, often are those interim actors that make protecting those properties possible. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And if I could add to that too, Brad, just 2 other things I want to make sure I hit on is that we work very close to the U.S. Forest Service. So down in Lawrence County, we just purchased 2,300 acres in Joanna, South Carolina. And 2,000 of those acres are adjacent to the entry district of the Sumter National Forest. And the U.S. Forest Service came to TNC and said, look, we have the money to buy this, but these federal funds, they take a couple of years to get them all passed through and down there. Well, hey, here comes the Nature Conservancy. We can mobilize quickly. We did. We formed a relationship with the landowner. We bought those 2,300 acres. We're in the process of transferring 2,000 of those acres to the U.S. Forest Service to expand the national forest there that we can all go out and enjoy. And then 300 acres is actually being sold at a discount to Lawrence County Parks and Rec, and they're going to create a new public park in Joanna, South Carolina, complete with equestrian trails. One other piece too, since you mentioned the Appalachians, there's only so much I can put in these presentations. We are doing so much across the globe, but worth mentioning, we all feel pretty good about this. 3 years ago, the Nature Conservancy wanted to look at areas to increase our focus. Still doing our host of work across the globe, but where are the areas that are we can have the biggest impact for people and nature? You all could probably guess we came down to 4. You could probably guess most of them. One was the Amazon, another was Kenya, another was Indonesia, but that 4th focal area is the Appalachian Mountains. I mean, truly a biodiversity hotspot. So we are ramping up our efforts even more so than ever before in the Appalachians because it's such a hotspot for biodiversity.
Great.
Just going to keep rolling down these questions here.
Yeah, please.
And
do you actively seek the land to conserve, or do owners seek you? I guess is one that
it's a both and really. When we're looking at that conservation vision map, if there's an area that we know we really want to go after, we'll go out and obviously you can easily look up online who owns properties and try to form those relationships. That way we use our network of other land trusts to know what's coming online. But a lot of times too, we will have folks that will reach out to us and say, hey, I've just inherited this property, or we've never done anything. We want to keep this property in the family. We want to talk about protecting it and whatnot. And so that's kind of how that works.
Okay, I'm going to skip over the one I posted, and Lance said, do you sell the oysters to help fund the project?
So I wish we had like these massive oyster roasts, and then we took the shells afterwards and took them out. But no, so you might be familiar with DNR SCORE program and the oyster shells that they collect. That goes part of these living shorelines as well. I will say one neat thing that the Nature Conservancy did back during the pandemic, oyster farmers, especially like the Chesapeake Bay area, everyone was taking a big hit because no one was going out for dinner anymore and ordering oysters, and they had grown all these oysters and had nothing to do with them. So the Nature Conservancy came in. NBC News actually picked up the story at the national level when we came in. And I want to say it was over $1 million we invested in purchasing all these oysters from these oyster farmers that we weren't going to be using in restaurants or for donor events and oyster roast, but we were using them to create these living shorelines. That's kind of how that piece works. And then these big oyster bags that you may have saw in that picture, those dissolve in water. So a lot of times we're setting them out there. We also use cinder blocks. It's pretty basic technology, but it really works. And as I mentioned earlier, we work with DHEC to get approval. So if you live on the coast and you want to try to stop erosion, your solution only used to be a seawall, but now you can pick between a seawall or a living shoreline. We work with Clemson University to write up kind of the guidelines for how to do that if you own a property in the low country and want to put the living shoreline up in lieu of a seawall.
Wow. So many connections. I'm just getting chills. How does TNC work with the South Carolina Environmental Law Project?
So we work a little bit with them. We try not to get in the business of suing folks. Kind of TNC's big thing, especially like working with corporations. We would rather be meeting with corporations in their boardroom than picketing out in front of their security gates, and just recognizing we can try to form partnerships that make sense, these corporations. But we will work with South Carolina Environmental Law Project if they have a big thing they're, big case they're working on, if we can provide support in those ways. We have provided some funding to them in the past for other things. So it's probably, maybe not a direct connection, a dotted line for things. But they're more on that legal side, protecting nature in the courtrooms, if you will, and while we are out there just purchasing the land, protect the habitats. If that helps answer your question, Julie.
Just more partnerships, all intertwined, right?
It's fascinating.
And relationships, which gets me, I'm not going to ask Ken's question. Ken, if you don't mind taking yourself off mute, because I have a feeling you have several things going on in that question. So would you be willing to share it?
Sure. What's intriguing me is when looking at that world map that you showed of where the Nature Conservancy is, I was focusing on what countries you were not in. So my first thought had to do with why would you not be in countries where Rotary is?
It's a great question. So we are actively trying to move to other countries. We just added Switzerland to our list. And if you remember from that map, when we say 79 countries, a lot of those countries we have boots on the ground working. Some of that 79, we quote that number, are we are impacting operations there. So we might be sending funding for a partner organization there to do work that we've approved on or something of that matter. What I've been really excited about and what kind of started this Mark Makulinski Match campaign is Rotary adding the environment as our 7th focus area. And we have this awesome mutual donor, Mark Makulinski. He's an Arch Clump Society member. He's a big donor to the Nature Conservancy, and he's put these funds up to encourage Rotarians to support the Nature Conservancy, or really it's kind of grown to any environmental gift. I have been doing my best. I have reached out to Rotary International. We had some conversations a few years ago, but this Rotarian conservationist here, Ryan Thackray, has been going, oh my gosh, trying to connect these big dots. You have the world's leading conservation organization, the world's leading civic organization, both focused on the environment. What are those things that we can do? And those are things, conversations that are actively happening now. It's, some of the challenges I'll say is that, both organizations are huge, and, it's just how do you, move that ship real slowly, whatnot. And we're stuck in our ways and Rotary's stuck in their ways. So I've been trying to figure that out. But our CEO for the Nature Conservancy, our global CEO, has met with Rotary International CEO. I think that, again, my hope is to really work towards doing something. But, we're ultimately going to be investing in areas where the science is telling us we can have the biggest impact from a conservation standpoint, from a government relations standpoint, from a philanthropy standpoint. Most of our work across the globe is funded by US-based philanthropy because there's just not, as many incentives and a culture of giving like we have here in the US and other parts of the world. So it's really trying to be, we're very focused on where we're going to go to make sure that we can have an impact and be resourceful and be good stewards of our donors' investments in the organization.
Excellent.
Is there an international organization like Rotary has that is where you have a global conference every year?
We don't have a global conference. Most of our stuff, especially in the US, is state-based. So we have big events here in South Carolina for our TNC members and whatnot. Now we are on the global stage. Candace mentioned earlier doing work in Indonesia. Right now, the Nature Conservancy is leading efforts for a massive pavilion at the World Water Forum, which is a project that I'm helping support through a fellowship at the Nature Conservancy. So in just 4 weeks in Bali, Indonesia, is the World Water Forum, which is the world's largest council on fresh water, largest conference on fresh water. 10,000 people are expected to be in Bali for this presentation, for this conference. And the Nature Conservancy will be there with a big booth, if you will, pavilion at this Global Water Conference, talking about, nature-based solutions for water. So we definitely do things. We're at the COP events. We're at the UN Water Week. We go to all the global conferences and have a presence. But as far as I know, and it's a neat idea, we don't have anything that's like a Rotary International conference has, where all the members come together. And it's something we can look at, work at doing. But that's probably a bit out of my. They don't give me all those tasks around here, Ken. Just tell me to go and raise. That's what they pay me the small bucks for.
Well, Greg and I have a very good friend in South New Jersey who retired from the Nature Conservancy, and he was very involved in, I think, the largest acquisition in New Jersey ever by the TNC, and helped facilitate that. I have a very quick Wizard of Oz story. So one of the reasons you're here today, and I have to say you are in the catbird seat between Rotary and TNC. You know that there's a huge responsibility on your shoulders to keep those synapses going. But I was really hoping for a program from the Nature Conservancy, and I have a longtime friend who we worked together in Virginia. She eventually became the state forester, but then went out to California, did some land trust work. But she's back in Virginia as the Nature Conservancy state director for TNC, Bettina Ring. And so I contacted her. I said, hey, Bettina, do you want to talk to us? And she said, well, you're in South Carolina. Why don't you go talk to the state director in South Carolina? And then she said, hey, we have this guy who is both us and Rotary. So I think you need to contact him. So here we are. But it just, to me, it underscores relationships and how there's so much passion in all of this work, and it just it's what we all love. And so what I want to do, and thanks for all of our speakers. 2 of our members select books that for each speaker that go into a little free library somewhere, generally in the upstate of South Carolina. And so this one was especially selected for you. E is for Environment by Lucy Curran in honor of you and the Nature Conservancy. It balances beautiful illustrations and charming text and the ABCs to help children learn about the outside world. So that is for you.
Oh,
And
thank you.
we really appreciate you being here today. And now, as all Rotarians, we do end our meetings with the 4-way test. And so if you would unmute yourselves and recite together with me the Rotary 4-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it
fair to all concerned?
Third, will it
build goodwill and
Will it
better
benefit
friendships?
and fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
concerned?
All right. Well, thank you all very much for being here today, and go out and have a Rotary afternoon.
Great.